Stephen Garza is one of the breakout stars of Boys State, winner of the 2020 Sundance Grand Jury Prize and the 2021 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Documentary or Nonfiction Special. Directed and produced by Jesse Moss and Amanda McBain, the film follows 1,000 teenage boys attending the week-long program Boys State in Texas in the summer of 2018 to build a representative government from the ground up, including a slate of elected officials from governor to sheriff. Stephen, who is Mexican-American and more liberal-minded, ran for governor of the Nationalist Party, while the majority of the students were conservative. The way in which Stephen handled his campaign gained the attention and respect from everyone, from his fellow Boys State participants to former presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. With me to discuss his family's immigration story, how his experience at Boys State changed his life, and his perspective on politics and society is Stephen Garza. Thank you for joining me today, Stephen. Boys State was released on Apple TV Plus in August of 2020. Let's watch the trailer.
I will skip the part where I brag for 3 minutes about how great and cool I am, seeing as we are all qualified young men of skill and character. People like that stuff.
Sounds good, yeah.
People like that stuff a lot.
Some people say they're a sports junkie. I say I'm a politics junkie.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
I'm playing this like a game. I would like very much to win. I love it, boys. I love it. Where you from?
I come from a very modest family.
I'm on the course to be the first one to graduate from high school.
I'm a progressive person, and I'm in a room full of mostly conservative people.
Our masculinity shall not be infringed.
I've never seen so many white people ever. I feel like everybody has this secret underlying need for bipartisanship.
A message of unity, as good as it sounds, is not winning anyone any elections.
Primary polls are now open.
Get yourselves ready for a turbulent election.
Whatever happens, dude, best of luck.
You win, I support you fully.
My name is Stephen Garza, and I'm running for governor.
This gets applause because...
As to the political views voiced in my speech, sometimes you gotta say what you gotta say in an attempt to win.
I think he's a fantastic politician. But I don't think a fantastic politician is a compliment either.
We're gonna do shock and awe. It's gonna be awesome.
I want y'all to take out your phones and go on Instagram. Everyone, come on.
Oh my God.
Will we show the world what patriots are made of? That when things get tough, we pull ourselves by our bootstraps. One nation, under God, lovers of the Constitution of the United States of America.
That's politics, I think. That's politics.
So let's hear a little bit about your background. You're a Mexican-American. What is your family's immigration story?
Yeah, so my father, by virtue of his grandparents were from Mexico and they were laborers. And so they would come up north to the United States to, do work during the spring and summer months. And then when it came down to it getting cold, they would go back down to Mexico and live off the money they had made. And so by virtue of one trip up there, my grandma was pregnant and my dad was born in Detroit, Michigan, which, again, have never visited or ever been that far north in my life. He, is a U.S. citizen, but my mom was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and grew up there with her family. Had permission to come over to the United States a few times. She would come and go. One time she decided that she wanted to stay. She, violated the terms of her visa and became undocumented at that point because she no longer had permission to stay in the country around the early 2000s. By that time, she had 4 kids. She had my older brothers, Stuart and Eric, me, and my little brother, Anthony.
You were all born in the United States.
Yes, we were all born in the United States. So I was born in the Rio Grande Valley in Mission, Texas. So we all grew up in the valley of Texas. I always joked that had I been born like 5 minutes further south, I would have been born in Mexico because
Oh,
that's
you were
how
that close. That close.
Yeah, we were that close.
It's amazing how just fate, you're born on one side of a fence or another, it completely changes your life.
100%. So my dad would stay at home taking care of us as the person at the house. And my mom would be working, at a Stripes gas station. And so that's kind of how those things worked out for a couple of years.
Were you aware of her immigration situation growing up?
No, it never really came up. I mean, I was 6 or 7 years old when my parents split up. And so my mom left my dad and took all of us to Houston, where my grandmother lived. And we stayed at her for a while. But around the time that they split up, and around 2007, is when she was finally able to get permanent residency status here.
Your parents split up. You're 7 years old. Your mom's undocumented. You go to live in Houston. How'd you turn out so normal and on the road to success?
It was a lot of wanting to do, I guess, the right thing and not let that affect me. I kind of realized that I had an opportunity to really do whatever I wanted to do with my life. And I, from an early age, was always super interested in politics and history, was always very friendly with my teachers. Actually, I turned 21 next month, and I'm still in contact with my second grade history teacher. I never forgot that she went out of her way to get me a picture book on Abraham Lincoln. That kind of reinforcement from my teachers, again, at when my home life wasn't the best, to be able to go to school and be able to, have friends and to be able to learn and then go home and be like, look, did you know this? Did you know that Abraham Lincoln did this? Really kind of pushed me. And another factor was there would be spans of days where I wouldn't see my mom because she'd be working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And so when I would wake up to go to the school bus, she would be getting what little sleep she could. And by the time I came back home, she'd already be gone, having started what would probably be her second or third job for the day.
There was nobody there to say, hey, Stephen, do your homework. You were self-motivated.
I didn't want to disappoint her. Obviously, at a young age, I kind of realized how much she was doing for me.
I understand you heard Bernie Sanders speak once, and that got you really excited about politics. You want to talk about that?
I was 15 years old. It was the summer before my freshman year of high school. I was a kid who would wake up and watch CNN before I had to go to school on my TV. I always had it on. I always wanted to keep updated with what was going on in the world. And so I was, interested in what was going on in the political world, and had heard that Bernie Sanders, who was running for president, this is maybe 2 or 3 months after he announced he was running. So he was still pretty much like a, senator from Vermont, right? And so, but I heard he was coming to the University of Houston. And I'm like, whoa, when will I get a chance to ever hear a presidential candidate speak? And so, I asked my older brother, Eric, I said, hey, can you take me to this event? I think it'd be really cool to see. And so he took me, and I was just in awe of all the young people that were there, a lot of people of color who were there to see this 70-something-year-old white guy from the Northeast speak and actually be drawn to him. And that kind of really resonated with me. And I really felt that we have the opportunity to use this apparatus for good. In the past, we've done it. And there are people, I saw a lot of people who were struggling. People like my mom, who I felt if she's working 2 or 3 jobs and we were barely scraping by, that's not fair. If hard work can get you anywhere, then my mom should be a billionaire. And from then on, I'm like, okay, let me get involved. And so I, started joining all these young Democrat clubs. Again, I was 15 years old, so I can't vote and I can't donate to a campaign, which is really 2 big important things in politics. And so, but what can I do? Well, I can make phone calls and I can knock on doors and I can attend meetings and I can become as knowledgeable as I can about this process, because in my mind, I wanted to be a good citizen, just be active and aware of what's going on in my country and make good and informed choices when it comes to what I think my political views are, which haven't really changed all that much since then. I love this country, and I'm able to acknowledge that it has many faults and problems with it, and that I know it could do better than it is right now. Once I kind of got to high school, I really didn't care too much about my grades. Meaning I did care, obviously. I wanted to graduate, but instead of doing my math homework, I'd rather be at a political event or reading something about politics or going to a meeting or something like that.
As long as you know how to count the votes, I think that's all that matters.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
Tell me a little bit about what Boys State is for those who don't know.
So Boys State is a program that's been going on in this country for close to, about 80 years at this point. And what it is that in 49 states, and every state in the union except Hawaii, I believe, and they have programs for both boys and girls, they basically get a couple hundred kids, incoming high school seniors, and have them create a mock state government from the ground up. And this program, again, has been around for so long and has produced a lot of famous alumni. Of course, Bill Clinton famously went through the program, Rush Limbaugh, Samuel Alito, Cory Booker, and people who didn't even go on to do politics, like James Gandolfini, played Tony Soprano, Bruce Springsteen, Neil Armstrong, Michael Jordan.
Ann Richards, who was the former governor of Texas, and Charlie Crist, former governor of Florida.
Yeah. There's a long list of alumni from Boy State or Girl State. And which is why I always thought it was interesting that many people don't know that the program exists. It's kind of like the secret little group that people go to and maybe sometimes forget about it. Tell me like, man, I forgot I went to Boy State like 20 years ago. The people who go to Boy State are usually valedictorian, salutatorian, top 10, super high GPA. Yeah, my GPA in high school was a 2.6 out of 5. And so my instructor who nominated me to interview before the board of American Legionnaires to go to the program was very worried about nominating me because my GPA was so low compared to the average Boy Stater. And he was right, because when I got to the interview, and usually they'll ask you about patriotism and what the flag means to you and things like that, but instead they grilled me for 40 minutes on my GPA. And I had to convince them in those 40 minutes that saying, hey, I've been super politically involved. I think I could do fairly well if you take a chance and send me. Don't look at the number, look at me and look at what I'm telling you.
As a good politician, you pivoted.
Yeah, yes, and I got the thumbs up and I got to go. There's about 70 of us at the orientation for our little region from where we were all at, the Katy, Texas area. And they told us, but before they started orientation, they had 2 guests that wanted to speak to us, Jesse Moss and Torsten Tilo, who's the director of photography for the film. And they basically said, hey guys, we're making a documentary on this year's session, and we're looking for about 4 subjects to follow. And if any of you guys are interested in it at all, please hang back and after the orientation. And again, at this point, Apple's not involved. A24 is not involved. Nobody has any idea what this documentary, we don't know if it's for internal use for the American Legion. We don't know if it's a passion project that'll sit on a hard drive for 30 years. We don't even know what it's going to look like when we get there. But, we go through the orientation and about 12 of us end up staying behind and sitting at this table. And the director and Jesse and Torsten are filming us with a camera and just filming us talk to one another about what we were looking forward to at the program in a month. And there were some kids who were being very animated for the camera and not being very natural with it and trying to kind of get the camera's attention. Whereas me, at that point, I think I was a lot more shy than I was now. And I was very reserved. And I gave my 2 cents when I thought it was appropriate. And I'll never know for the rest of my life why that caught Jesse's attention, because I was the most unassuming character at that table. And so I get up to leave and he stops me. And he says, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And I said, sure. And he starts asking me a bunch more questions in private. And then finally he asked me, can I take you out to eat? And I'm like, of course, stranger, you can take me to, you can, and so we did. And he got to know me a little bit more when we ate at this barbecue place, and then took me to my grandmother's apartment. And we filmed an interview on the steps of my grandmother's apartment, which is in the film. And at the end of that interview, an hour later, he finally just asked me, would you like to be a subject in this film? And I said, yes, whatever that means.
First of all, what was it like having the cameras following you around? Was it intrusive? Did you, after a while, forget they were there?
The first time, it's very awkward and uncomfortable. I remember the first time that I had the camera on me, and when I was walking around, I'll never forget it. I was sitting down on the couch talking to somebody at the campaign office, and Jesse just tells me, pretend that we're not here. And then after he says that, Torsten moves in and puts the camera this close to my face while I'm talking, and I start laughing. Right. And I said, you can't expect me to, if I turn my head left, I'm going to hit you I'm going to hit you. But gradually I became just kind of forgetting that it's there. It's just, I've been surrounded by phones my entire life. Everybody's always taking pictures and videos and stuff like that. This is just a bigger camera, a more expensive camera. And so I kind of, by the second day had gotten pretty used to it. I had a designated camera person and boomstick person with me from the hours of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. I don't ever interact with them on camera like in the film, but in periods of downtime, formed a really good friendship with them throughout the week, because we're walking 10 miles a day in the Austin heat, and they're doing that while trying to film with these 30-pound cameras and stuff like that. And so if I were doing something uninteresting, if I was just sitting on my phone, not doing anything, and on the other side of the room, there's a big commotion happening, they wouldn't hesitate to drop me and go film what they were doing over there, right? Because you only have one chance to film everything, right? It's a documentary. You have one chance, and if you miss it, it's gone forever. You can't get it back. And so they would film all the speeches. So I think people maybe the first time kind of tilted their head at me a little bit, but when they're filming all the speeches and everybody running and all the antics and all the rah-rah stuff, and they're filming a bunch of B-roll of everyone, I would probably say everybody who went to Boise State is at least in 3 shots of the film.
Tell us how Boise State is structured. 1,100 kids together. They say, okay, make a state. What happens? You all go in a room and you say, okay, what do we do? I mean, what happens?
So our lives are very regimented. There's a strict schedule we have to follow to make sure that we can do everything we need to do throughout those 6 days. And so the most basic element is that about 40 of us go into what's called a city, and we elect our mayor, and we're divided up evenly between the Nationalist and Federalist Party, which are 2 political parties that they're just names, right? So Nationalists are blue, Federalists are yellow. They don't mean anything yet. We're randomly assigned to one, and all we know is that we hate the other party and we got to compete with them throughout the week. There are certain positions that once you run for them, you can't run for anything else. So for example, the mayor, since he is now an elected official, can no longer run for any other office. He can still run for party office if he wants to be the chairman of the party. So at that point, I'm starting to run for governor, which is a big gamble because if I mess up, I'm done for the week because everyone else has already ran for office and it's too late to get on the ballot and all the party positions have been filled up by the second day. Governor is the highest position at Texas Boys State. And so we're moving up this pyramid. Okay, now we go up to the county level and we elect, county chair, sheriffs and stuff like that.
How do these elections work? Everyone gives a stump speech. Why vote for me? Why would anybody want to vote for anybody if we don't even know what the political parties are? What were people saying? Why vote for me?
At the very first stage, it comes down to a lot of personality. So when you're running for mayor, so there's 40 of us in a room and you're running for mayor. There's, let's say 3 people choose to run for mayor and they all give like a 1.5 minutes speech about what they should run for mayor and they list up their accomplishments, or they may try to be funny and that may win the crowd over. They step outside and then we all do either like a vote, we do tallies on the board, or we just kind of put our heads down and lift when they call their name and somebody counts us. And so as you move up higher, obviously that's not going to work. And so that's when you actually have actual voting done on a computer. So for example, if you're voting in the governor primary, you're allowed to vote from 7 to 9 p.m. on that day on a computer.
You ran for governor of the Nationalist Party. How did the nationalist agenda come together?
It all comes together at the state party convention. You go down from city to county to district and then the state. And so in the state is when you have, so if there's 1,100 kids, you have roughly, 550 in each party. So at the state level, all 550 kids are in one room and it is chaos. The party, like in real life, the party convention is chaos and we all lived for it because people are new. So at that convention, we have to elect our party officers who will lead our party. What will our platform be? What issues are we going to take a stand on? What is our campaign message? How are we going to beat those Federalists? And they're doing the same thing in their own party. 95% of the kids in that room are just the background noise. They have no voting power. They influence certain stages of it, but not all of it. Not everybody votes at Boise State. Even though everyone is eligible to vote, some people just don't go do it. Like in real life, they don't just go to vote. So I think in the final race for governor, turnout was about 83%. So there was a nice chunk of people who didn't bother to go vote. And so it's really so whose side voted more could end up being the factor who decides who wins the elections.
It's very real life in a way.
Yeah.
Robert was one of the people who was running against you. He was from the other party. He played to a fervent base that's a lot more conservative than he really was himself. You want to talk about that and how that you think relates to maybe even some of our current politicians?
Yeah, so Robert actually, he ran against me in the primaries. We were both nationalists, so we were both in the same party. We ended up being the top 2 candidates in the primary and the runoff election. So it's basically me or him who will be the nationalist nominee for governor. And so at the time, I didn't know that he was lying about his political positions. I wouldn't find that out until over a year later when I saw a rough cut of the film and got to see him stating that, hey, these positions that I'm rooting for aren't really the positions that I actually hold, but this is kind of like a game and I want to win it. And this is a conservative group, so I should play to their conservative politics. Robert is such a character, and I love him so much. He is, as you see him on screen in real life, he is, just super, he's funny and very goofy.
You liked him despite the fact that you were running against him.
Yeah, I know, and there was a lot of mutual respect. And so something that, and I'll mention that how I dealt with him was when it comes out during that runoff election that day, it comes out that I had organized and supported a March for Our Lives rally in Houston, which was a pro-gun reform march that I had led. And obviously the Second Amendment is a hot button issue at Texas Boys State. And so there was a lot of rumors that I was very anti-gun and that I supported, all these different things because I had been associated with this organization. And so when Robert gets wind of this, he could have easily went up to that podium first and eviscerated me on guns and probably would have, ran away with the entire race. But instead, and you see this in the film, he pulls me off to the side. He asked me what my positions are on guns are. He says he's been hearing some stuff and he doesn't want to attack me for it. So he lets me go first and explain my position. And it was really at that moment when I realized that, it was such a class act thing to do, to not use this newfound ammunition against me, but to really let me go first and say, I'm not going to attack you on this. Go up there and explain your position. He says, whoever wins, I support, if you win, I support you fully. And I tell him likewise, because I really, at that moment, found so much respect for him.
It's very funny, though, because you wouldn't see that in politics today.
No, and I think it's because young people see the politics that happens in Washington and then they see it. And they hate it. There's nobody in this country who doesn't hate the way politics is run in Washington, D.C. Everybody complains about Congress people. Everyone complains about bureaucracy or whatever it is. And so we see that and we're like, we don't want to do that. We want to do things differently. We're still going to argue and we're going to beat the hell out of each other on certain issues and we're going to fight and things like that. But we don't feel that because we disagree with each other politically doesn't mean that, we're still not each other's neighbors and that we can't be friendly about it and be friends with one another. Really, if he had won the primary, I would have been his biggest supporter because I always felt that he treated me with respect.
You and Renee Otero, who is African-American, you were aligned with the same party, and Renee is also featured in the film. And there was some racist propaganda used against Renee. Tell us about that, and how did Renee and you handle this situation?
There was an Instagram account that started posting some very racist propaganda memes, whatever you want to call it, against Renee. And word had got around that's what happened. And behind closed doors, it's not captured in the film, but they gathered all of us at one point throughout the week. And the people running the program, the counselors, basically, let us know that, of course, it was unacceptable that, whoever would be found would be kicked out of the program. But they really do believe in the motto of learn by doing, giving the students the tools they need to form a government and just standing back and observing them and make sure they don't kill each other. That's really all they're there for. People really rallied around Renee after that because both sides had really disavowed that person and came, even if they didn't like Renee personally, that rallied around him throughout his impeachment process, right? When Renee was facing an impeachment, out of 550 kids, only 12 voted to impeach him, which was a resounding victory for him and everybody. And he felt that love and support afterwards because obviously he was doing a good job and a lot of people respected him.
Now, the film has garnered many awards and recognition. It's won the Sundance Grand Jury Prize in January 2020, the 2021 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Documentary. It was also on former President Barack Obama's 2020 End of the Year list for movies. How does that make you feel that you are featured in this award-winning movie? People recognize you and say, hey, you're the guy from Boys State?
Sometimes, yeah, especially I go to school at the University of Texas at Austin. That's where we filmed Boys State. And so it's like every day for me, I'm on set basically again after all these years. I'm walking to class and I glance over it and I'm like, oh, this is where that happened. I remember when this happened here. By the time filming ended during the week and the film premiere at Sundance was a year and a half.
Right.
So it was a year and a half of nothing. Like I went on about my life like any normal person. I started my senior year. I graduated high school. I started college at the University of Texas at El Paso for a year and finally get the news in the fall of 2019. Hey, so we submitted the film to Sundance and we got in. And so we're in the U.S. documentary competition. We're taking you and your mom there.
Do you get any money? Do you get any royalties at all for being in this film?
So the thing with documentaries is that there's ethical reasons as to why subjects aren't directly paid for their participation, is because everything you see in Boy State happened because it happened for real. When you see me get emotional in the film, I'm getting emotional because I'm sad and not because I'm being paid to be sad. And so there's a lot of ethical considerations when making a documentary, especially when it comes to compensation. But what I can say is that there are other indirect ways that this film has helped me out. This film is why I'm being able to go to college and afford to go to college. You know, I've been supported by App 1A24 through some indirect means of like, hey, you know, ethically we cannot pay you for this, but we can help you out in many other ways that again are still super life-changing. And just being in the film, right, the opportunities that have come up because of my being in the film, the last 3 jobs, internships that I've had, in the interview process, the person interviewing me said, hey, I saw the film, by the way.
You got the attention of Bill Clinton, for example. You were on Bill Clinton's podcast. Why am I telling you this? How was that experience?
When I got the call that was happening, it was like, you know, wow, this is, you know, and the opportunities I've had to like do Q&As with, you know, with celebrities and other politicians and some organizations.
But you did talk to Bill Clinton. What did you guys talk about?
We talked about the film. Obviously, we talked about our experiences at Boy State. He shared on me his wisdom, and we talked about the current state of politics. And my favorite moment from that was really afterwards, is that towards the end of the conversation, we were talking about a biography about President Grant, and I asked President Clinton what was the name of his autobiography that I'd love to read it. And he tells me like, you know, oh, it's, you know, my life, and don't worry, I'll send you a copy of it. And a few days later in the mail, I get this huge package from the office of President Clinton. And I open it, and at the very top of the box, there's a really nice note kind of thanking me for talking with him. And he kind of explains some things about the books that he sent me. So he sent me 7 books in total. And so he wrote this really nice long note and signed it. And it's like, you know, it has like this, you know, William Jefferson Clinton on the very top in like gold letters. Not only did I sit down with him for an hour, and he sent me all his books, and he wrote me a nice letter, but he also signed and left me a note in every single book about what I should take away from that book, and signed it as well. In the letter, he just mentioned that he lost his first race for public office, much like I, you know, had lost my race for Boy State, but that he had learned so much from it and loved it every second of the way. Like I did as well. I learned a lot from my experience, and I made so many friends and so many great memories, and I loved it. For me, there have been a lot of times when I've worked in politics, and because I'm a lot younger, that I felt that I was never taken too seriously. Sometimes there were times where I felt after an electoral defeat that maybe this isn't for me and maybe I'm on the wrong path. But to have a former president sit down, take an hour of his day to sit down with me, and then write me a letter, and then write me all these notes into these books and have them sent to me, that kind of really reaffirms like I must be doing something right.
In the beginning of the film, a teacher says that our increasingly internet-based society has gotten in the way of our ability to have a dialogue. Social media plays a big part. Do you agree with that assessment by the teacher?
Yeah, there's a thing that Renee says in the film that said, like, you know, this is, he says that at first he thought this was a conservative indoctrination camp. But he later goes on to say that this is actually what every liberal needs, is to, and not even for me, even just liberals, but for conservatives to step out of their bubble that they formed around themselves and actually communicate and talk to or debate somebody who disagrees with you. I mean, on social media, you know, most of the friends you have are going to be more or less like-minded people. On social media, you're going to follow the news that you want to follow, the politicians you want to follow, the organizations you want to follow. And it's a lot easier to yell at somebody over social media than to yell at them in person, although some people find it quite easy to do both. But for me to go to Boy State with my hard beliefs, have those beliefs challenged and pushed back, and me having to debate them makes me a better person, makes me better civically minded, because I get the chance to see somebody and not think of them as, quote, the enemy or my opponent, but just somebody who I have to share this country with that has disagreements about how we should run it.
Do you still keep in touch with any of the other participants, Renee or Robert?
Throughout this entire 3-year process, we've texted, we've been doing Q&As together. We got to hang out in person for the weekend, and that was so much fun. We've all grown and matured in the 3 years since. Obviously, some of us have changed some positions on certain things. Some of us realize that maybe the way we do politics isn't the best way to go on about it. But we all really love and respect one another, and we're going to be connected for the rest of our lives, not only just through the virtue of being part of this boy state brotherhood, but also because of this film. And this is the end of our, the Emmys was the Hollywood ending that we hoped we'd get.
Right.
And so right now it's like it's kind of done. Like the boy state movie journey has come to an end.
So where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? You're done with college. What do you want to do?
I hope in 5 years, I'd like to work at the White House. I don't think anybody who plans to run for office at an early age should probably run for office, because I think that's more of a desire to hold power rather than to serve your constituents. In the next 10 years, don't see that happening. Like for me, it's like I'm in college and I get to work for the DNC, which I'm really happy to do so. And
And you're working for the DNC now. I understand you're the assistant to the executive director in Texas, right?
For the entire party. So he's the executive director of the party.
Oh, wow. That is a big job.
That is, yeah, it is. I just started this. I just started this week, and it's
that is very impressive.
Thank you.
Was that hard to get that job? Did obviously being on Boys State helped you get that interview, I would assume?
Yes. So the Shelby Cole, who works at the DNC, saw the film and reached out to me a few months ago. And I had applied to a position with the DNC. Like not for that. I applied for like a social media strategist position, and that ended up going up all the way up to Shelby, who said, hey, like we know each other, and the job was going to be super full time and probably wouldn't work, but she knew that Sam was looking for a new assistant to bring on, and so kind of made the introduction. So everybody's still remote over there in DC. So how it works, I go to school. Most of my classes are in the morning. So I'm usually done around 11 a.m. And then from 11 a.m. onwards, I'm there for them, and so like I do that. I'm, doing, what I need to do for them. And then at night is when I do my homework.
You are a very, very busy guy.
But I love it, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
What advice would you give people who do not get to a strong role in Boys State, especially young people who want to get involved civilly, get involved in their civil government, get involved in political parties? What can they do?
It's really just reaching out. It all starts really locally. I mean, you got to have some experience under your belt. That's how I started, right? I just reached out to like the Harris County Young Democrats and made friends there that I'm still friends with, and made some really great mentors, like my friend James Burnett, he's the president of the Harris County Young Democrats. He was just a member when I met him. He's a few years older than I am, but he taught me a lot. He taught me to something simple like, hey, on a suit, you don't button the second button. You just button the first one. Or when it comes to like dealing with politics and strategy and stuff like that, I learned a lot from him. So it's really just getting involved with your local party. It's, researching it and being knowledgeable so that you know what you're talking about. And especially if you're young, right? If you want to volunteer your time, right? It's very hard to get a paid position at the local level. But I'm saying like no local campaign will ever turn away volunteers. No local party will ever turn away volunteers. Everybody who ever made it in politics had to start somewhere. And I would say 99% of them started at that local level and learned as much as they could, made those friends, made those connections with people. And when it came time to move up, they want to have those people in mind who dedicated their time selflessly to advance the policies and politics of something that they believed in. It took me so long to get to a position where this can kind of be my livelihood. And I think that we need to change some aspects of it. But patience, and if you work hard and be able to do this as their livelihood. And for me, it's like, it's not work because I assistant to the executive director, even just work, like that's a dream job for me. And my dream job isn't to be an assistant. My dream job is to be able to work.
Be the director one day.
Well,
right. You don't want to be the assistant director. You want to be the director, but you got to obviously you're starting somewhere.
I've accomplished my dream because I get to do something that I love doing and I have loved doing my entire life and I've cared about, to help in any way help these people advance the agenda of politics that I believe in. And I get to make a livelihood out of it rather than having to sacrifice one for the other. Either I have to sacrifice doing what I love to make money or make money doing something that I hate. So I get to do both now. I get to do something that I love and that, pays the bills. And that's a dream for me, right? So that's why I'm super happy to be working with them and to just have had this opportunity to be with them.
Where can people follow you on social media?
All my social media handles are the same. It's just at Stephen A. Garza, StevenAGarza. I don't post as often. I'm on it a lot, and I try to reply to everything that comes my way. When it first happened, there was a flood of people, and it was very hard. Anybody who takes the time out of their day to reach out to me, I really appreciate it, and will always try to reply to them if I can.
Tell me, what is your American dream?
to be able to do what I like doing, and I'd like to have a family of my own and a nice cozy home somewhere. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Hopefully, still in Texas, if not in Washington, and working as a staffer somewhere. I think that's where I may be able to do the most good. And then sometimes I feel more comfortable not being the guy, but the guy that the guy counts on.
Thank you very much, Stephen. You can watch Stephen in Boy State on Apple TV+. Stephen, we can't wait to watch you grow, see where you are in 5 and 10 years from now, and see what you're going to be doing in the future. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks, Brad.
Appreciate it.